This deep dive is tough even for us. It stopped us in our tracks when we first came across it. You're about to hear the story of Vlad, a 17-year-old who took his own life last May in 2024. Afterward, his family discovered he'd been part of a secretive online forum. And it wasn't just about sharing dark thoughts. It was, well, a pro-suicide community. The police even found a suicide kit at Vlad's home with pills and poisons. So how does a seemingly ordinary teenager end up in this situation?
It's a chilling case that really brings home the complexities of the digital age. We have this incredible tool for connection and information, but as we're seeing, it can also be weaponized in ways we're still struggling to understand.
Vlad's family described his early childhood as happy, but things changed when he hit his teens.
Right. He was diagnosed with autism, depression, and anxiety around then. On top of that, he developed a painful neurological condition. So you've got this young man grappling with multiple serious challenges.
His family did say he was showing signs of improvement before his death, socializing more, even traveling. But it seems the underlying vulnerability was still there. It's just heartbreaking.
And that's where this online forum comes in. It's a massive community, over 50,000 members globally.
Which makes you wonder how closely connected were these members. Did they really know Vlad?
Vlad's sister Masha brought up that very point. She doesn't believe anyone in that forum knew Vlad well enough to be influencing such life or death decisions. And her sister Mia actually exchanged messages with the forum moderators. Mia is convinced the forum acts as a sort of echo chamber, potentially even engaging in grooming tactics to push vulnerable people further down a dangerous path.
So we're not just talking about a space for venting, but potentially active manipulation. That's terrifying. What are your thoughts on that?
It raises a massive question about responsibility. If a forum is aware that its members are suicidal, is there an ethical or even legal obligation to intervene? It's a murky area.
And trying to shut down a forum like this must be incredibly difficult. Where do you even begin when it's online and potentially crossing international borders?
Exactly. The internet makes it incredibly difficult to enforce laws or regulations. In a strange coincidence, the BBC had been investigating this particular forum for years, and just before Vlad's death, they exposed a Ukrainian man, Leonid Zakutenko, who was selling poison online.
Wait, hold on. So Vlad was actually trying to buy poison through this network?
Yes. Though it's important to note he didn't end up using that specific poison. What he ingested came from a different source in Poland. It's suspected the poison was mislabeled to get past customs checks, adding another layer to this already tangled web.
It's like every detail reveals another layer of complexity and danger. I mean, we're talking about a network spanning continents, making it easier for anyone, even teenagers, to get their hands on lethal substances. Where do we even begin to unravel this?
Vlad's parents have been very vocal, asking how the sale and encouragement of poison can be legal when it directly resulted in their son's death. They are alive, but their son is not. It's a potent question, and one that lawmakers around the world are grappling with. This case really exposes the gap between our laws and the reality of online harm. But before we jump into that, I think we need to take a closer look at Vlad's activity within the forum.
Right. Because it sounds like this wasn't a sudden decision. What can we learn from Vlad's posts and conversations over time? Is there any indication of how he was led down the path of death, as his mother put it?
From what Vlad's family has shared, it does seem like there was a clear progression, a gradual escalation in his posts and private messages over time. And that brings us to a critical question. Were there any attempts to moderate the content on this forum? Were there any warning signs or interventions when someone expressed suicidal thoughts?
You'd hope there would be some safeguards in place, especially when you consider how many people could be exposed to this kind of content, including children just browsing the internet.
Unfortunately, based on everything we've gathered, the answer seems to be no. There don't appear to have been any real safeguards, which makes this forum potentially dangerous for anyone who stumbles upon it. This lack of accountability is a major concern and speaks to a much larger issue we're seeing today. The alarming rise in suicide rates, particularly among young people.
That's a perfect segue. You're right, we can't ignore the broader context here. What's the current situation? What are the statistics telling us?
The numbers are definitely worrying. The Office of National Statistics reports that suicide rates in England and Wales have risen by 10% over the past 6 years. And while suicide by poisoning is still relatively rare among young people, it's the method that's increasing most rapidly in this age group.
That's incredibly concerning. So what's being done? What are governments and organizations saying about how to tackle this multifaceted problem?
Well, the UK government is highlighting new provisions in the Online Safety Act. These are aimed at removing illegal suicide content and protecting children from harmful material, even if it's not technically illegal. The government's urging platforms to take action now, not wait for the full implementation of the law. There's a definite sense of urgency in their message.
It's good to see some proactive movement, but is that enough? Is there pushback from other groups who feel more needs to be done? What are they saying?
The Samaritan's Charity, for example, has criticized the regulations as inadequate, especially for smaller websites that might slip under the radar. Their CEO, Julie Bentley, is advocating for stricter regulation of what she calls legal but harmful content. And not just for children, but for adults as well. She argues that adults can be just as vulnerable online, especially when dealing with mental health issues.
That's a really interesting point. It makes you wonder how you define harmful in the digital space. It's such a subjective term. What about Ofcom? Where do they fit into all of this?
Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator, has announced that they'll soon have new enforcement powers, specifically to ensure online platforms are fulfilling their duty to protect children from harmful content related to self-harm and suicide. It seems like there's a growing recognition across the board that they need to step up their game too.
Okay, so we've got the government, charities, and regulators all weighing in. But ultimately, this comes down to real people, families like Vlad's, who are left picking up the pieces after these tragedies. What can we learn from their experience? What are the key takeaways from this case that we as individuals need to be aware of?
That's what we'll delve into in the next part of this deep dive.
Vlad's case is a stark reminder that the internet, while an incredible tool, can also harbor dangerous ideologies and harmful content. We often think of it as this vast, impersonal space, but it can have very real and very personal consequences. As we've seen tragically, those consequences can even be fatal.
What's unsettling is that Vlad's story could happen to anyone. This isn't an isolated incident. It highlights the potential for harm that exists online, especially for vulnerable individuals.
It's almost as though the internet acts as a sort of amplifier, magnifying both the positive and negative aspects of human interaction. It can connect people and offer support, but they can also create these echo chambers where negativity festers and vulnerable people can be exposed to dangerous influences.
Absolutely. That's why it's so crucial to talk about these issues, to raise awareness about the potential dangers lurking online, and to equip ourselves and those we care about with the tools they need to navigate the digital world safely.
So much of this comes down to prevention, right? What can we do to prevent similar tragedies from happening?
Well, for starters, open communication is key, particularly within families. It's about creating safe spaces where young people feel comfortable discussing their mental health, their experiences online, and any concerns they might have.
How can we foster that sense of openness and trust? It's not always easy for young people to open up about sensitive topics, especially to adults.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about talking to young people, it's about truly listening to them. We need to take their concerns seriously, validate their feelings, and create an environment where they feel heard and understood. Too often, adults dismiss online interactions as trivial or unimportant. But we need to remember that for young people, their online world is very real. It's a significant part of their lives and can have a profound impact on their well-being.
We have to respect their world, even if we don't always fully understand it. What about the role of schools and communities? How can they contribute to prevention?
They play a vital role. Schools, for example, need to integrate digital literacy and online safety into their curriculums. It's no longer enough to just teach kids the technical aspects of using computers and the internet. They need to be equipped with the critical thinking skills necessary to evaluate information, recognize harmful content, and navigate the complex world of online interactions safely and responsibly.
So it's about empowering them to be informed and discerning digital citizens, not just passive consumers of online content. What about community-level initiatives? What are some examples of effective programs or resources?
Communities can provide a safety net by offering resources and support services for young people struggling with mental health. This could include youth centers, counseling services, peer support groups, and mental health awareness campaigns. The key is to create a network of support so young people know they're not alone and that help is available.
But let's be realistic. We can't monitor our children's every move online. And even with education and support, some young people will still find their way to those darker corners of the internet. What can be done at the source, at the platform level, to address this?
That's where the responsibility of tech companies comes into play. We need to hold them accountable for the content hosted on their platforms. They have a responsibility to implement effective content moderation policies, invest in AI and human moderators to identify and remove harmful content, and create user-friendly reporting mechanisms that actually work.
Some people argue that regulating online content is a dangerous path, that it could lead to censorship and infringe on free speech. How do we balance these concerns with the need to protect vulnerable individuals?
It's a complex debate for sure, but I think we have to remember that freedom of speech isn't absolute. We already have laws against inciting violence and hate speech. Encouraging someone to take their own life is arguably even more dangerous and harmful.
It's like the classic example of yelling fire in a crowded theater. It's not protected speech because it creates a clear and present danger.
Exactly. And I think there's a growing recognition that online platforms, given their reach and influence, need to be held to a higher standard when it comes to harmful content. They can't just claim neutrality and shirk responsibility for the consequences of what's happening on their platforms.
It's about finding that balance between protecting freedom of expression and safeguarding individuals from harm. But it's not just about removing content, is it? It's also about providing support and resources to those who are struggling. What are platforms doing to address that aspect?
That's an important point. Platforms need to do more to proactively connect users who may be expressing suicidal thoughts or engaging in self-harm with mental health resources and support services. This could involve things like pop-up messages with helpline numbers, targeted ads for mental health services, or partnerships with organizations like the Samaritans.
It's about offering help and guidance at the moment when someone might need it most, not just reacting after the fact. But even with all these measures in place, there will still be cases like Vlad's, where a determined individual finds a way to access harmful content and act on it. What does that say about our society as a whole?
It points to a deeper issue. We need to have a more open and honest conversation about mental health, about the pressures young people are facing today, and about how we can create a more compassionate and supportive society.
It's about addressing the root causes of this crisis, not just the symptoms. But that's a monumental task. Where do we even begin?
It starts with each of us. It starts with having those difficult conversations, with challenging the stigma surrounding mental health, with reaching out to those who might be struggling, and with demanding better from our institutions, our policymakers, and our tech companies.
So it's about individual actions, but also collective responsibility. We can't just sit back and expect someone else to fix this problem. We all have a role to play in creating a safer and more supportive world.
And that's where I think we need to shift our focus from what we can't control to what we can. We can't control the internet entirely, but we can control how we use it, how we educate ourselves and our children about it, and how we hold those in power accountable for making it a safer space for everyone.
It's about feeling empowered, not just fearful. It's about recognizing the potential of the internet for good, while acknowledging the risks and taking steps to mitigate them.
Precisely. And I think that message resonates deeply with Vlad's family. They're not calling for the internet to be shut down. They're calling for it to be made safer, more responsible, and more accountable. They want to see real change.
They're channeling their grief into action, trying to prevent other families from suffering the same heartbreak. Their story is incredibly moving.
Their dedication is a testament to their strength and commitment to creating a better world in Vlad's memory.
It's a story that highlights the human cost of these online dangers. But it also gives us hope, right? It shows that even in the face of immense tragedy, people can find the strength to fight for change. It gives us hope that by working together, we can make a difference.
That's a powerful message, and it's something to hold on to as we navigate the complexities of the digital age.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. Global platforms, complicated algorithms, personal struggles. It can feel like any one person's actions are just a drop in the ocean.
It's true that tackling online harm requires a multifaceted approach. Legislation, platform, accountability, education, community support. It all plays a part. But that doesn't mean individual actions are meaningless. Quite the opposite. They're the foundation of any large-scale change.
So what can we actually do? What are some tangible steps listeners can take to make a difference, both in their own lives and their communities?
First and foremost, educate yourselves. Stay informed about online safety trends, the risks tied to various platforms and apps, and the resources out there for getting help. Knowledge is power, especially in the digital world where things change so rapidly.
You're right.
Yeah.
So often we just blindly click accept on terms and conditions without truly grasping what we're agreeing to or the potential risks involved. It's like we hand over our digital selves without a second thought.
Exactly. And once you've taken the time to understand the landscape, share that knowledge. Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues about online safety. Start open conversations about mental health and the challenges of navigating the online world. You might be surprised by the ripple effect just one conversation can have.
It's about breaking down those walls of silence, creating a culture where people feel comfortable discussing these sensitive topics without shame or judgment. But what about the more technical side? Are there practical steps we can take to protect ourselves and our loved ones online?
Absolutely. Start by reviewing your privacy settings on social media and other online accounts. Be mindful of the information you're sharing publicly, and if a particular platform or app makes you uneasy, do your research. Consider whether it truly aligns with your values and prioritizes user safety.
It's about being a conscious consumer.
hmm
But in the digital world, we have choices, and we can choose to support platforms that prioritize safety and well-being.
Precisely. And if you come across something online that raises a red flag, whether it's cyberbullying, hate speech, or content related to self-harm or suicide report, most platforms have reporting mechanisms, and while they're not perfect, they're a start. Your report might be the one that triggers action.
So we have a responsibility to speak up, to flag harmful content and hold these platforms accountable. But what about in our offline lives? How can we offer support to those around us who might be struggling?
Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just be present. Listen without judgment. Offer a kind word or a helping hand. Let them know they're not alone. Sometimes that simple act of human connection can make all the difference. And if you're truly worried about someone's safety, don't hesitate to reach out to a mental health professional or a crisis hotline. There are resources available, and help is out there.
It's a reminder that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. We need to normalize those conversations.
Absolutely. And as we've seen with Vlad's story, early intervention is so crucial. If you notice changes in someone's behavior, withdrawal from social activities, or expressions of hopelessness or despair, don't dismiss them. Reach out, offer support, and encourage them to seek professional help. You might just save a life.
It's about being aware, being proactive, and being there for each other. It can feel daunting, but even small acts of kindness and support can make a world of difference.
That's a powerful message to end on. Vlad's story is a harsh reminder of the very real dangers that exist online. But it's also a call to action. We can't afford to be passive bystanders. We all have a role to play in creating a safer and more compassionate online world.
And it starts with each of us,
Mhm.
right here, right now. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought and inspired you to take action. Remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources available, and there is hope.
Never forget that you are not alone.